You know, of all the amazing things that the highbrow crowd at the Davos World Economic Forum has discussed on their annual agenda of talking about what to do with us, that's us, the people they get together once a year to sit around on a stage and chat about as if we're zoo animals they've been distantly observing that are completely segregated from them somehow, maybe like on a totally different planet. And them as in the people who the rest of us never voted for, and most of us never even asked their opinion one single time, but seem to make an annual habit out of discussing what's to be done with us as if they've unilaterally decided they're just in charge of that somehow. Just chatting it up over there with the finger sandwiches and the Perrier, talking about things like mind control.
What we're trying to figure out is how to decode the signals of the brain.
A future where elites own us through our biometric data.
Control of data might enable human elites to do something even more radical than just build digital dictatorships. By hacking organisms, elites may gain the power to re-engineer the future of life itself.
Maybe the most eye-popping thing that we've personally heard over the years is this concept that in a few years from now, actually, we're all going to just own nothing and like it. Quick aside, I don't know if you've seen what's happening out there with inflation, but the cost of living has gone to face-palming your head through a cactus level of insane. Wall Street Journal and others are publishing stories about how entire neighborhoods of single-family homes are being bought up at 20% over cost to either be turned into renter blocks or to sit around empty with price tags that laughingly price the average person just right the hell out altogether. So this country is being not so slowly turned into a giant land of permanent renters. I mean, here we've seen home costs go up at least threefold. And they got these dinky little houses with closets for bedrooms that shouldn't even be worth $100,000 being sold for $400,000 like the people who own them know literally no shame. I mean, we personally found out earlier this year just how little stability and security renters in this country actually have. Because we'd lived in the same home for 3 years, and we'd always paid our rent early, or at the very least on time. And we were just up and kicked out with hardly any warning at all. And that's something as integral to living your life in this society as a home is, or at least a roof over your head. So you could probably better understand why we laughed our asses almost clear off when this Scandinavian lady gave a WEF presentation a few years ago talking about how everything is going to be rented in the future, right down to something as basic and small as a screwdriver to screw a screw into a wall.
Why do you want to own your cell phone? I mean, you want the function, you want the service, right? Why do you want to own a cell phone if you can just lease it? And if you lease, why shouldn't you lease your refrigerator or your washing machine or your dishwasher, or why do you want to own it? I mean, it's not like the plastic and the metal, it's like, I own it. You know how much a car drives, how much of its life? 4%. Or if you take a drill, it's used 15 minutes. It's not a lot, is it? And most of us, I know there are some guys here that really love to own a drill. But for the rest of us, we just want a hole in a wall, right? Why don't you want to go into a business model where the company owns it? Why don't you want to go into a business model where the company owns it? 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 Why don't you want to go into a business model where the company owns it?
I mean, yeah, why wouldn't you just want to go into a business model where you literally don't have anything at all? I mean, it's like your body. You don't really need your DNA, right? Like, you don't really need this stuff in the middle. You just want the walking, talking machine, right? So, like, why do you even need to own that? You should just let the company own it. You should just let the companies own everything. They should just be like the new monarchs of the future. We should just let them own us and everything else too. And we should literally have nothing at all, so that the power dynamic is absolutely 100% zero in our favor. That makes so much sense. That is brilliant. Why didn't we all think of that? Why didn't we all just think of being slaves to corporations?
Thing is, we've been talking about the authorization future for a long time on this channel. It just isn't as sexy a topic as aliens and UFOs. so it tends to make some people's eyes glaze over. But you can really start to see it happening out there now. The future we're talking about isn't based on some one-time authorization either. At its mealy black heart, social credit is about continual reauthorization.
So it'll be about the maintenance of your status.
When I think about the flaming circus hoops the average person has to jump through just to qualify to rent a home here, and how prices have been continuously going up, and how even if you jump through all those hoops like an expert and get straight tens from the Olympic judging committee watching your performance, they could still kick you out on the street at the end anyway for whatever arbitrary reason they dream up. Then try to wrap my mind around a time when continual reauthorization will play into everything, including, I guess, the newly created privilege of being able to use a screwdriver when you need it. I'm really not sure how anyone could live even remotely comfortably in a world where they own nothing and, quote, like it.
And I think we're going to a place where we just want mobility, where we don't care so much about owning a car. It's actually a little bit of trouble. If you just come to driverless car and pick me up and I can drive around and this car will be driving all the time.
Things can be taken away at a whim, but even this parliament member from Davos writes about the pitfalls. Once in a while, she writes, I get annoyed about the fact that I have no real privacy. Nowhere can I go and not be registered. I know that. I know somewhere everything I do, think, and dream of is recorded. I hope that no one will use it against me.
Like living in a world where everything will be based on a digital passport system of inclusion or exclusion, based on an ever-shifting goalpost, based on whatever we're told is the greater good this week, and a world where even if you play by all of those rules, you could still be voted off the island anyway for wearing an ugly hat or using an off-limits word or having an off-limits thought or whatever reason they come up with next because, well, you hold none of the cards. You aren't even allowed to own a card, let alone the many cards it would necessitate to play the game because you literally have no power in that relationship whatsoever. And if you're someone who isn't new to this channel, then you'll probably recall in the years leading up to 2020 how I would often wonder aloud in our videos, how would they get the masses to accept such ridiculous living conditions? And I don't mean living conditions, I mean the condition upon which they're going to try and get people to live. But as we're about to enter 2022, I think it's starting to become all too clear exactly how. Enter Meta.
Hey, and welcome to Connect. Today, we're going to talk about the Metaverse.
You know I was going to have to go here. Facebook, as you have likely heard, because the ads are everywhere now, including the movie theater, they announced right before Halloween that they've officially changed their name to Meta, short for Metaverse.
Now, the best way to understand the Metaverse is to experience it yourself. How we actually experience the world and interact with each other. Experience the world, experiences. You're gonna be able to move across these different experiences in the experience. You're gonna be in these experiences. Many of the most immersive experiences, just a fundamentally different experience. You can start to see how the Metaverse is going to enable richer experiences and really bring them into these shared experiences. Now, there's a lot that needs to get built to create experiences like this. New experiences that you're having to a completely different set of experiences in the Metaverse. Different kinds of Metaverse experiences, the most important experience of all. Experiences.
The system has promised all of this equality, and this right here is looking like the only place where people will ever get to have anything even remotely close. And actually not really, because in reality they'll only get to have a digital pretend world made up of digital non-existent stuff. So if the reality of the World Economic Forum ladies' wet dreams comes true, by 2030, they'll be renting their outrageously overpriced IKEA tiny home timeshare with a bunch of total strangers who also won't own their own screwdrivers either. But hey, at least they'll spend all their days with VR goggles strapped to their heads, walking around in a Second Life 2.0 wannabe world, dressed up like Digi-Xena warrior princess, living in a digital McMansion in Mark Zuckerberg's Metaverse, which he and his coworkers have decided to tell us all about in an hour-plus presentation with a plethora of completely off-putting, unnatural TED Talk arms.
You're gonna be able to gesture with your hands,
while they read buzzword-filled scripts to each other that really do sound like they were generated by an AI and not written by an actual person.
What about unlocking more mixed reality experiences?
We're already seeing the potentials of these kinds of experiences today as people are building for our pass-through API. creators who make digital objects, creators who offer services and experiences.
Building AR experiences that empower people.
We're going to need to help build the skill sets of the people who build these experiences.
Creators are helping us build these experiences.
Allow people to use their hands more naturally in more virtual experiences.
Tell me all about it.
The metaverse means experiences you can have.
It's even more off-putting, which is a phrase I might decide to use at least 5 more times in this video. How many times Zuckerberg uses words like natural to describe this cheesy-looking ersatz digital world replacement that Silicon Valley plans to shuffle people into as they attempt to shift society into a phase where they expect us and plan us to conduct more and more of our lives in virtual spaces, as we're increasingly expected to rarely leave our homes.
Connecting socially, entertainment, games, work is going to be more natural and vivid, of interacting with devices that are much more natural.
And if we do leave, not to go very far. I just want to point out really quick, the logo there is an illusion. It's the appearance of a twisted infinity symbol. It's actually a hollow circle. And Microsoft, of course, came out within days to announce they're also going to build a Bill Gates version of Metaverse for Teams, which they're eerily calling Mesh, like a giant digital net they've trapped reality in. Because if there's one thing that will make all of those mostly pointless meetings at work go by faster, it's got to be sitting around in a fake office in fake outer space while your boss and coworkers yarn on and on about stuff you'll be sure to pay even less attention to when it's coming out of the cartoon mouth of a digital avatar dressed like a giant robot than you would if you actually had to sit there in physical reality and physically listen to any of it in the actual world.
But I'm genuinely optimistic about work in the metaverse.
I'm here at my desk where I experience experiences.
But that's what certain billionaires apparently expect to happen in the not-too-distant future, where everything from viruses to climate change are justifications to dictate how little we're allowed to access and experience the natural outside world. It's like all those science fiction movies from Body Snatchers to Stepford Wives are actually on the verge of sorta kinda coming true, but in a much lamer way. We've talked about it before. You remember the 2009 Bruce Willis movie Surrogates, right? The plot revolved around a high-tech future where the majority deemed the world too dangerous and scary to physically exist in the day-to-day, so everyone just opted to stay inside the safety of their own homes and send more attractive, physically fit, remote-controlled humanoid robot versions of themselves out into society that they could live vicariously through instead. And there's actually a company out there working on those. But in the meantime, this is what we're being offered.
Who's a good persistent state virtual object layered on an interactive pass-through environment? Oh, you are?
Entrance into Meta is even called Horizon Home, as in your home is as far as your eye can see.
You're going to be able to invite people over, play games, and hang out. You'll also even have a home office where you can work. Your home is your personal space.
And you may be thinking to yourself, who cares? Facebook sucks. I don't have a Facebook account. I don't plan on getting one. And I would say to that, I don't have one either. In fact, I actually got kicked off of Facebook a long time ago. And I don't even remember being told why. Probably something I posted was offensive or who knows. I don't know. But they just kicked me off. And our Truthstream page had over 40,000 followers on it. And that got shut down too because they kept asking for more and more invasive verification. And knowing what we know about Spybook and its built-in social engineering experimentation schemes.
Facebook under fire after news breaks overnight that the site actually conducted this huge social experiment on all of us and all of you at home. Well, 700,000, and that's a lot of people.
A whole lot of people, you said it. You know, it was a study to see whether Facebook could influence the emotional state of its users on that news feed.
We just hated it too much to continue capitulating to that. And I don't think we're alone in feeling that way. In fact, most of the time when I'm out and a business person directs me to their Facebook page and I respond by letting them know I don't use Facebook, they usually say to me they wish they didn't have to. Most people admit to me that using Facebook to them is the online equivalent of taking a nasty medicine. They just have to hold their nose and force it down, despite how gross it is. That's Facebook, okay? And Zuck himself seems to be aware of this too, because he even mentions the switch to Meta as the company's attempt to distance themselves from their flagship product. I think he says it at least twice.
To reflect who we are and what we hope to build, I am proud to announce that starting today, our company is now Meta. Our mission remains the same. It's still about bringing people together. But now we have a new North Star to help bring the metaverse to life. And we have a new name that reflects the full breadth of what we do and the future that we want to help build. From now on, we're going to be Metaverse first, not Facebook first. That means that over time, you won't need to use Facebook to use our other services. Over time, I hope that we are seen as a Metaverse company.
But Bill Gates has already come out to say that within 3 years, all these virtual meetings that people are having now due to the vid are going to be happening in the metaverse. And as we've all witnessed over the course of the pandemic in the last 2 years, they can easily shift the way society conducts its business and force people to use technologies they otherwise wouldn't choose to on their own, because that's already been happening. And this is all a part of what's been deemed the Great Reset, right? The main ad for Meta also has that theme, the Great Reset theme, the death and rebirth of society at large, symbolically written all over it.
I used to love studying classics, and the word meta comes from the Greek word meaning beyond.
Nothing you see in these kinds of commercials is accidental. If it's in the presentation anywhere, it's there for a reason, and you don't have to take my word for that this time. In a world where people tend to overlook symbolism as reading too much into things, if you point it out, Zuckerberg or someone working with him really wanted to make sure people understood that symbolism was being purposefully employed here. Because at one point in his presentation, he's sitting in front of a bookshelf, and of the few books whose titles are legible, you can clearly see he has a copy of Taschen's Book of Symbols prominently featured there on the shelf. So, despite the fact that symbols can mean all kinds of things depending on who you ask and why, we're going to go ahead and reference that book as he's clearly blinging it here as a go-to. So you have this ad that they've put it everywhere. They put it at the top of YouTube. They put it in movie theaters. It's probably on TV. I don't have, but I'm assuming. And in it, you have this group of millennials who have just come from a room in an art museum where the art portrays the sun shining. In fact, the one on the right that's only seen for a brief moment as the woman steps out of the way actually shows a sun on top of a pyramid. There's actually a presentation on the TED Talk by a guy 5 years ago titled Atlantis and the Roots of Egypt, and he's claiming they've run all of this stuff through computer models and that the Great Pyramid at Cheops was originally crowned by a 2.7 meter gold sphere, equivalent to the mathematical number E, which was meant to symbolize the Eye of Horus that he theorized through his computerized mathematical models used to be used as a form of worship of the sun and the star Sirius. But I digress. These people are mesmerized by this painting that's in front of them of a tiger attacking a buffalo. And there's some really old folk tales regarding the tiger and the buffalo. There's a Chinese version, a Vietnamese version, which teaches how the tiger got his stripes. But personally, I'm guessing the reason this painting was chosen is more about the circumstances under which it was painted. It's entitled Fight Between a Tiger and a Buffalo, and it was completed by French artist Henri Rousseau in 1908. And according to the Cleveland Museum of Art, Rousseau worked on the painting while he was in prison for fraud. And the thing is Rousseau himself never left France. So we're told that his inspiration for this tropical jungle scene was all done purely from his imagination after reading travel books and visiting the local botanical gardens. So what you have in essence is a man who's never been to the jungle himself, painting something purely from his imagination while locked in a prison cell. And that's the artwork they chose to introduce you to this meta, which I feel is more than a little disturbing. It's a life much like the one the World Economic Forum and its Great Reset describes for all of us in the future, where we won't really be expected to leave our homes for work or school or hanging out with family or visiting or travel. I mean, they're talking about that all the time now. But that's okay, right? Because using our VR goggles in the meta, we can go anywhere.
You're going to really feel like you're there with other people.
This is the dimension of imagination.
But back to this commercial, there's a lot more going on here than just a tiger attacking a buffalo in the uncanny valley of oversized jungle plants and googly-eyed dancing animals. After these people venture out into the painting a little ways, they're greeted by an owl, which a lot of people know as a symbol of wisdom. but which the Taschen book that Zuckerberg owns points out, is actually known the world over as the consort of death. And so we've got this book as well, of course, and the entry on owls talks about how they have extremely keen vision. Thus, it is not surprising that owls have become symbols of both acute awareness, the invisible seer in the dark, the bird of crafty skill that accompanies Athena, Greek goddess of civilization, protector of Athens, and of the stunning power of death, mortal terror of the stealthy visitor in the night. In Germany and Eastern Europe, an owl alighting on a dwelling or barn is deemed to foreshadow an imminent death. And this association extends across most of the world, including, for example, the alliance in Native American mythology of the owl with skeleton man, the god of death. But as often the powers of death are also the powers of transformation, and the owl is symbolically bound to the renewal of life that is mythically implicit in death. Once the owl flies up, you see in the back of the painting that the sun is now setting, and the moon is rising over the water. Again, the sun and moon are mentioned in Taschen as symbols of the eyes of Horus, so that would be the second time that's come up. In addition, the moon and the water are two very distinct symbols representing the subconscious mind. And in the water, we see what looks like a gate, and the reflection of that gate in the water makes a hexagonal structure. And beyond it, taking up most of the sky, is Saturn. The hexagon being an appropriate symbol for Saturn if you've ever seen pictures of its pole. In other words, it looks like we're being invited to the portal of Saturn. Now, Taschen's Book of Symbols only references Saturn twice. Once is a picture of Saturn devouring one of his sons with no further commentary under the entry for the symbolism of the mouth, as a reference to the engulfing jaws of death, as if Saturn is just going to devour us all. And the other is on the page for the entry on the symbolism of prison, which is now the second time prison has come up in this short ad. Here on this page about prison, it talks about alchemy depicting Saturn as the governor of the prison in which sulfur, the motivating spirit of both will and compulsion, was bound. Saturn is associated with lead, cold, and the darkest time of year, implying the weight of limiting circumstances by which our soaring aspirations are shackled. Kind of an interesting symbol to show us for a place where they claim we can do anything, right?
Instead of looking at a screen, you're going to be in these experiences.
And then it talks about the literal sense of what prison symbolizes, and that at the bleakest level, it's nothing more than the soul getting trammeled, not only by incarceration, but degradation, violation, and false arrest. So that is the reference in this book in regards to Saturn. Manly P. Hall further elaborates on Saturn in his work, The Secret Teachings of All Ages. He says, to the initiate, the skeleton of death holding in bony fingers the reaper's scythe denotes Saturn, Kronos, the father of the gods, carrying the sickle with which he mutilated Uranus, his own sire. In the language of the mysteries, and this is in italics, the spirits of men are the powdered bones of Saturn. The latter deity was always worshipped under the symbol of the base or footing, inasmuch as he was considered to be the substructure upholding creation. Hall then continues with a few paragraphs of allegory regarding the mystery of human evolution of the spirit and souling matter that eventually becomes man and raises him to the estate of the gods, which sounds an awful lot like the promise of transhumanism. Shots of Saturn are also prominently featured in other meta videos, including the main presentation where at one point a little girl and her grandma go into meta and literally take a virtual trip to Saturn.
Actually, I have to write this paper. Will you help me?
Let's take a closer look. What part of the solar system are we talking about?
Saturn.
Just in case the symbolism hasn't been picked up on any of the other times it's been shown, which is a lot. An image of this moment where these two are staring at Saturn from the perspective of the viewer, which means the viewer is also staring at Saturn, was also sent out as the official announcement of the name change on the Meta Newsroom's Twitter account. And right after the name change was announced, too, just by the way, a hashtag went momentarily viral on social media, #FacebookDead, because apparently the word meta is pronounced like the feminine form of the Hebrew word for dead. And so that was going around the media as well. And just in case you weren't absolutely sure, I mean, this has really hit you over the head amount of confirmation of symbolism, repeated symbolic elements.
Hey, are you coming?
Yeah, just gotta find something to wear.
This is probably the reason why Zuckerberg's wardrobe, because he's talking about how we can have all these outfits in Meta, his wardrobe consists of his usual black shirt and pants, but also a skeleton suit, just like the Native American mythology mentioned in Tashin suggests, and an astronaut suit, for when you go to Saturn or whatever. So it isn't my abundance of symbolism, but former Facebook's that Meta will be some kind of digital door to the underworld, well known in mythology to be a place where death and rebirth initiations are said to take place. And I just want to point out, too, that these people in this commercial kind of look like they're being forced to dance against their will. I mean, take out this upbeat music and slow it all down a little, and you tell me what's happening here. Because whatever it is, it kind of looks uncomfortable. And I get that they're making reality seem horrible right now, so that nobody will want to deal with it at all. But unless they're just joshing us here, I don't understand how they're going to get everyone to just accept reality being replaced so we can all live in the Ready Player One trailer park and hang out in what my friend Amy calls these 90s PlayStation graphics. Truly, I mean no disrespect when I ask this, but are they hiding the real tech somewhere in the back and presenting us with something they came up with 20 years ago just to see if we'll bite? Because Tupac's hologram back in 2012 blows all of this stuff they're showing in the presentation away, and that was 10 years ago. Heck, 70s Star Trek makes this look old, okay? And there's just something incredibly creepy about Zuckerberg talking about how much fun it will be for users to set stuff on fire and shoot people in the immersive virtual reality he refers to as feeling oh so natural in games they're working on for the platform like Grand Theft Auto.
I'm excited to announce that the Rockstar Games classic Grand Theft Auto San Andreas is in development for Quest 2. This new version of what I think is one of the greatest games ever made will offer players an entirely new way to experience this iconic open world in virtual reality.
Because I guess they want people to be able to smack a hoe, right? In this immersive virtual world that he keeps talking about how real it is.
Onward. Pistol whip. Blade and sorcery nomad. Have you played Population 1?
I mean, yeah, I love the game so much that...
For those who haven't, Population 1 is a thrilling battle royale. The studio behind fan favorite Arizona Sunshine.
I love Arizona Sunshine. And that game basically got me and my friends through the first few months of the pandemic.
That's awesome.
Okay, I'm sorry, just no. No. These people seem to have no idea who they are and where they are and what they're doing and who they're talking to. At all. I mean, first of all, this isn't just some guy. But if it was just some guy and he was like, yeah, I played a video game for the first few months of the pandemic, nobody would be like, that's awesome.
And that game basically got me and my friends through the first few months of the pandemic.
That's awesome!
This reeks of that thing where you work for a rich person and you have to suck up to them and make them think every single thing they do is the most amazing thing anyone's ever done all the time, which is extremely creepy when you consider who this man is, how much power he has, and what he's trying to do here. But he is this person who's trying to do this here, and he's gleefully talking about how during the first few months of the pandemic, he was playing a first-person shooter game of infected people during the first few months of a time when people were dying of infections. I don't know. It's a stunning lack of self-awareness that just permeates this entire presentation in a way that's actually pretty comical and hilarious, and would be funnier if this wasn't actually a thing they're actually talking about actually doing to us all.
It's not like this fixes anything regarding inequality. That's the thing. Did you guys see that show Upload? It's the one where the guy, it came out, it came out in 2020. So it was perfectly timed. And it's about this guy who dies and he gets uploaded into the cloud for his afterlife.
10 a.m. Breakfast is over.
No, it's not even real food. And even there, when he ran out of credits, they stuck him in the crappy part of the program because he didn't have enough money for the digital 4-star hotel that the rest of the dead people were hanging out in. I mean, it's like humanity didn't bother to solve the very real problems of insane wealth inequality, poverty, hunger, healthcare, all these things, right? So I guess screw it. We'll just all jump ship and go to Mars and hang out in Meta instead, right? As if those unsolved issues are the homework that's just going to get shoved under the bed and not going to come due anyway, right? It's not going to be following everyone around like shadow monsters wherever they go. It is. It's just going to migrate to these new places. Because it wasn't solved. It's not been fixed.
Well, I think the sort of transcendent theme of all this symbolism, from the commercial to the heavy-handed use of Saturn again and again, both in the commercial and the presentation, and probably elsewhere if you look for it, is the fabrication of this new world. As far as I've seen so far, no one is really creating a truly unique, new, untouched world of imaginative possibilities. It's really mostly about recreating the natural world and then trying to lure people in to what is an ersatz. At very best, it's an imitation, and in reality, possibly a very shoddy imitation that doesn't come close. And what this has to do, in my opinion, with the symbolism of Saturn is that it's very compatible with this concept of the reset they're claiming for society, which theoretically could be whole and complete and overwhelmingly good. But again, you've got ersatz programmers at the switches. It's almost as if they're just trying to contain a herd and placate people rather than really offer a new, better way, right? Things were really messed up in the system as it was. There's all kinds of problems. We have been duly critical of as much of it as possible, but none of that has been solved, as Melissa said. There isn't a true fix to that. There hasn't been a deeper analysis of how to rectify everything. There's just been an offering of a new place to go screw up digitally. And sure, there's lots of possibilities, but you know, the mystery of Saturn surrounds the creation of everything out of nothing. Saturn is very much this death and rebirth place, but it's not death for death's sake. At least if you follow the Greek mythology, you know, it's death for the sake of a rebirth. Hades and the underworld, that's for people. That's where spirits go to hang out after they die and kind of evolve into a sorting out of the good and bad, and Elysium and Tartarus and all that. But Saturn is more like an obliteration, a back to the primordial forces, Kronos eating his children, and Uranus. Those were titans in the primordial state of reconfiguring the raw materials of life. And that's the type of death and rebirth that Saturn signifies, at least from what I have read, you know, and what I recall. And so in Arthur C. Clarke's 2001, not so much the Kubrick movie, but to an extent, the character goes and dies on Saturn and is reborn after a process, and that consequences a necessary destruction of Earth 1.0 and then a rewrite, a starting over. And that's very frightening and looming. It could be for good or ill. It depends on who's at the switches, but I just don't trust these people. What I really see more than anything, and what we've seen in the last couple of years, is being cut off from the natural world. I think that's what this multiverse, this metaverse really signifies, and that's what's kind of troubling. You know, it's not just Facebook and other people. This system has been forecast and predicted and promised for decades. Ray Kurzweil, among others, has been writing about this for many decades. It showed up in movies, this idea of this digital world and the merging of humanity and technology, but it is dependent upon, at least in their opinion, it's dependent upon cutting us off from the natural world, because we're not good enough for that world anymore. We, the many, have screwed it up, not the few who've controlled things, right? And with that, just in the last few months and years, we've seen this Orwellian newspeak changing of definitions, a policing of thought. Policing of thought was directly discussed at the World Economic Forum just a few years back. They're actually talking about using technology to see what kind of feelings and deceptive or guilty behavior is behind certain words and activities. Art, it's like a polygraph for your brain.
There's a huge government program now to increase measurement technology for neuroscience. Anything that is in current conscious awareness can potentially be decoded.
Those certain forms of mind reading, I think, for the most part today, requires the consent of an individual. But if we could get to the point where either you can have an unwilling suspect or an unwilling individual having their brain decoded in some sense, legal systems don't bake in any presumption that we can do that, and so there's no legal protections that could be afforded to you. And so if you look nationally, internationally, at whether or not there are any human rights, if there's any constitutional protections for something like freedom of thought or mental privacy or cognitive liberty, nothing like that exists yet.
Personally, I think it's just a matter of time before there will be a portable brain decoding technology that decodes language as fast as you can type with your thumbs on your cell phone.
Wow.
And everyone will wear them because people have shown that they're quite willing to give up privacy for convenience.
And so we're supposed to separate from our language and our vocabulary, and there's things we can't talk about even though they're happening in the real world. And if you say them, you get censored or penalized or just deplatformed altogether, right? And so mentally and physically, there are increasingly real barriers of our personal sovereignty. We are supposed to let them into our body and our brains and minds, and they're supposed to have access, but our access is cut off, and our rightful ability to say, no, that's my body, my choice, and it's definitely my brain and my mind, my choice, that's supposed to be fading away. And, what did the Matrix talk about? The desert of the real.
Welcome to the desert of the real.
Once the immersion into the fully digital takes place, if people allow it, if they go along with this, and if enough people don't say no, and if they just go easily into the night, the real world becomes a desert, like a gulf across a chasm, across the Grand Canyon, and then everything is connected. We're all connected to each other, and we're connected to every possibility on these little digital nodes, and everything's possible all at once, except for the real world. People joked when critics were pointing out the United Nations conference back in 1992. That one guy went to the meeting and he drew up a map and showed these are going to be the no-go zones. These are places where humans are not going to be allowed to go, and people scoffed. That's ridiculous. People aren't going to be cut off physically from areas. What about now? Is there authorization that has to take place for you to even travel or physically go somewhere? Are we going to be really cut off if we don't toe the line, if we say things that aren't acceptable? It's disgusting. At the same time, there's this promise anything is possible in the new digital world, and that's what's going to fix the inequality, because anyone can do anything, and we're the drivers and we're the co-creators in this metaverse. At least it's supposed to feel that way. But don't forget the 101 rule of gambling. If you go to Vegas, okay, try your luck, have some fun, but don't forget the house always wins. And in this system, you can make or do anything you can think of, unless they don't like it, because then the programmers and the authorizers can bind you to just about anywhere. They can limit you to your own little blasé box. They could put you in a digital hell or a prison. I mean, those possibilities are endless.
Can you imagine Facebook jail for Meta?
I mean, it could be quite literal and quite immersive and quite real and feel endless. I mean, maybe that's worst case scenario, but it's creepy. The mystery of Saturn, why would they show Saturn? It is a pretty somber death and rebirth. Like, Saturn is one of the ultimate steps in that Greek mythological universe. But the mystery of Saturn is that the creation of everything, all that we have, the cornucopia of everything, comes out of nothing. It's an obliterated non-zone. It's the big zero. So how does something come from nothing? That's a mystery. How does a one come from zero. Well, you could see where that fits in with the whole digital world. And this cornucopia is a paradox. Again, at least in these hands, it's an ersatz paradox, because we're trading all that we have for a mirror world, for an image, for an imitation of that world, which is going to leave us with nothing. At least it could. Of course, the natural world is incredibly brutal and nasty. Just out in the wilderness, you can meet your death very easily, but the possibilities are there for you to survive and for you to take control. In the face of the forces of nature, no one's really to stop you from at least trying. That isn't necessarily true in an authorized world. Facebook's version of Metaverse is just one iteration. They're just the first ones to publicly show people what it might look like and try to invite you in and go ahead and set up your account and start with the games, and it's going to grow from there.
Gaming is how a lot of people are going to step into the metaverse for the first time.
But again, this is what Ray Kurzweil wrote about, I think, in 1999 with The Age of Spiritual Machines. Not only does he predict an overall acceleration of technology to an infinite level and a literal merging of humanity with technology such that we're no longer just a human species but something else, but very much his vision of this digital world is not only all the fun things you can imagine and want to do, but a world where your digital assistant, your little personal program, not only gets to know you better than your partner or your spouse, but they get to know you better than yourself. And then the allure of that is supposedly going to become so satisfying that you wouldn't want to be with your spouse anymore. You wouldn't want to date people in the real world. Forget the dating apps. This thing is going to know all your little intimate buttons, the things that make you feel loved and turned on and all that kind of stuff. And in Kurzweil's book, it grows from just at first being an assistant who can help you with remembering your calendar and when you have meetings, to being someone that your spouse is jealous of, and then you're distant from your spouse, and then the divorce is just an inevitability. It doesn't matter, because this person is falling in love with their assistant, and all their fulfillment, romantically, sexually, personally, hobbies, all of it is supposed to be fulfilled from this little bubble that just reflects you. What do we gain from cutting off real human contact like that? Why don't we just work on becoming human again? We're not always that great at it. I don't claim to be. I feel very cut off in this world at times, but what are we giving up here? You know, there's certainly bad things in the real world. There's a lot of really bad problems, and I think they're sidestepping the whole thing, and it becomes what Michael Crichton wrote about, and then they made movies about in the 70s and redid in the HBO, the Westworld, right? At first, they're going to create these sort of androids and digital beings just for fantasy. You can go to the Wild West and shoot them out, partner, or you can go to Rome and engage in all their stuff that's historical. But in the sequel, which was much cheesier, by the way, in Future World, which also was in the 70s, the replacement of androids really just became about replacing the population. It wasn't any longer about entertainment. It was about getting to people. It was like Body Snatchers, and they started with celebrities and influential people and journalists, but they were branching out to literally replacing and killing off the original analog versions of people until they had a programmable look-alike population, one for one. Are we not basically talking about that in the digital world? I don't know if it's going to be like Bruce Willis' Surrogates movie with physical android people walking around to shops and down the street, but in the digital verse, yeah.
What you see on the left is an entirely virtual reconstruction. This gives you a sense of a future in which you'll be able to interact with another person's realistic avatar in virtual reality in real time.
We already live in a mind that's inside of a brain that they already can't explain, and that's cut off by the senses, so your mind is never really in the physical world. So they figure double down, square root that, extrapolate that, so we have no connection with anything, no real connection with people, no real connection with the natural world and the forces there, and just kind of a version of it.
It'll feel like you're right in the room together, making eye contact.
And that's before we're even able to fully understand the meaning, the deep energetic connection we actually have to this space that we physically live in, which I think is a lot more intricate than we've ever been told. I know you can probably hear it in my voice that I'm just a touch bitter after 2 years into the vid, but I feel like this sorry, sad ersatz consolation prize for the actual world we're being told we have to largely give up now because we're just too destructive and deadly a force to be allowed to really experience any of it firsthand is just not doing it for me.
Not everyone wants their social media profile linked to all these other experiences.
Gee, I can't imagine why. And I didn't understand it back then, and you probably don't remember, but in 2013 when we first started this channel, we had a video and an article discussing all these DARPA projects, because DARPA was doing experiments on better ways to measure levels of oxytocin in our bodies, which is a powerful hormone that acts as a neurotransmitter that Scientific American refers to as nature's love glue. And studies have suggested it hastens wound healing, it protects against stress, it enhances feelings of connectedness and generosity, which DARPA said were a matter of national security. But the levels of oxytocin in our bodies go up when we kiss and hug each other, which occurs because having actual human contact in the actual real world has actual positive effects on us. Effects that I seriously doubt can be genuinely replicated by strapping goggles to our heads that makes us think we're walking around in some digital cartoon. At least not this one that Zuckerberg is selling to us in a way that just feels so uncomfortable to watch after even the first 10 minutes, let alone hour and 17?
A future where, with just a pair of glasses, you will be able to step beyond the physical world and into the kinds of experiences that we have talked about today.
But will there be experiences?
They're going to unlock some pretty amazing experiences. From immersive experiences in fantasy worlds, to cohesive augmented reality storytelling experiences.
These are the most important experiences that you'll experience. That's why we experience experiences multiple times.
Because this experience is totally going to be an experience.
Are you now, or have you ever been experienced?
Experienced experiences while you're experiencing experiences.
These experiences
amazing new experiences.
So the symbolic time of Saturn, not just in the myth, but in the way that it's been celebrated throughout history, both ancient and up to recent times, Saturn's time is at the Christmas time. It's at the solstice of the sun, when the sun is mythologically dead, right? That's Saturn's time to shine because the sun has gone to the underworld symbolically, and darkness reigns, and the world of everything under the sun, all that we are and all that we know and all that's already been done, where there's nothing new, that is subdued, and is a time when things are topsy-turvy. And instead of the king, the philosopher king, ruling over people theoretically, mythologically, the fool is king, and the rules are reversed, and it's foolishness and it's festivity and it's revels, only for a time, just in time for a reset, for everyone to blow off some steam, and then it's back to a new version of the rule of the king, only it won't be the same sun this time, metaphorically speaking. Sun symbolizing our natural world, the base reality. Base reality is not what they plan to deal with anymore.
It does mean building more sensors into a form factor that's comfortable to wear for a while.
And maybe the creepiest part is the end of the ad, when the tiger and the buffalo say, "This is gonna be fun," and they give each other that super shady side eye, like they totally know something, they're in on something and know something that we all don't. Just... ew.